Okay, so those stories must meet those criteria when it comes out of here. They're loaded up. We call this cargo the sprint backlog. It is delivered to the build team, and they start sprinting. All of this happens before we start sprinting. Okay? At 3M, there's a lot of 2-week sprints that happen. Doesn't have to be. In infrastructure, sometimes we know that there's a lot of unplanned work that happens. So in order to try to make sure we get a window where we can work on planned work, sometimes we shrink the window down and make a sprint 1 week instead of 2 weeks. But it could be anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks. That would be considered acceptable within the framework of Scrum. But for software development, it's 2 weeks. And once we start sprinting, we have another event that we do. And anybody know what that is? It's a daily stand-up meeting or a daily Scrum meeting, right? We'll talk about this more. We got a whole session on daily Scrum or daily stand-up, but this is part of the transparency is that every single day, in fact, I was a few minutes late coming in because I was running one of the daily Scrums for one of my teams this morning. But generally, we go around the room. We use Jira to do this. Jira is a great way to do it because we can see all of the stories that have been committed in the sprint backlog, and we can see all the people that have tasks assigned to them, and we can go through individual by individual and say, how's it going on this task? And they say, oh, I'm talk to you about for a while about how it's going. Do you have any impediments? Is there anything that's keeping you from your commitment to deliver this in this sprint? Every day we do that. And that's the daily stand-up meeting.
A question from online about inspection. Saying that that's an activity during the sprint. I don't know what that is though.
Here, just inspect and adapt. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So these are what we call the pillars of the empirical process control, and this is the foundation of Agile Scrum. Okay. It's the kind of the lean thinking. It's kind of the whole business of we believe that things will change in the process of our project. Therefore, we want to periodically inspect where we're at, what we've done, the value we've delivered, and show it to the stakeholders. And we expect them to give us feedback, and we will adapt to that feedback. Does that help? Okay. Okay, so we were talking about the daily Scrum. We're sprinting because we had the sprint planning meeting. And once we sprint every day until we are complete. We've been through 2 weeks. Then we output something called, and I think you've heard this term already once, a potentially shippable product. Now, we've had discussions in these classes before about potentially shippable product. Some people get a little hung up on the terminology. But the reason we call it potentially shippable product, I like to think of it like this. It's like a wedding cake. If you imagine a wedding cake, a very big one with multiple tiers in this wedding cake. And maybe when we sprint, this build team is the baker, and we have a sprint that says, I want you to make one column, because there's 3 big columns on this big, tall wedding cake. And that's one sprint. It's an increment. It isn't the product, that's the whole cake. But it delivers value. We could sell it if we wanted to. It really does have value. You could eat it, but it's just a column. Okay? So that would be a potentially shippable product. Okay? Now, we got to introduce another role. This is our individual over here called the Scrum Master. Okay? Now, if the product owner is outwardly focused, the Scrum Master is inwardly focused. Okay? The Scrum Master has no business talking about what we should be working on. They are all about how. They want to see this team, this build team, become a high-performing team. They want to make sure that we're delivering on every single sprint commitment. They are all about listening for impediments. Okay? Now, one time when we were having our daily stand-up meeting, we had a good scrummer, the scrum master, this was many years ago. And we're having these daily stand-up meetings and everything's going great. And the development team, for me, the development team is spread throughout the world. At that time, it was primarily in India, in the India Development Center in Chennai. It is now in the GSCs in Costa Rica and the Philippines. It's spread around. So we do have some challenges there. Time zones is a challenge, especially when we're meeting every single day for a short meeting. But at any rate, so we were having our daily stand-up meeting, and the development team was doing great. They were coming to every single meeting, giving us good, input as to how things were going. And, the one day, only one person showed up, and it's like the Scrum Master's like, wow, this is what's going on. So I talked to this individual, and Chennai had a 100-year flood, and the development center was 2 feet underwater, So that's an impediment, right? And we have impediments. Some of them we call blockers. Some of them are things that we can deal with even within the team. Scrum Masters love to see when the team deals with their own impediments, like, I broke a laptop or whatever. Those are smaller things, but being 2 feet underwater is a pretty big deal. So the Scrum Master did exactly what Dee talked about here. He escalated this to Tier 2, and they escalated it to Tier 3. We use tier structures, but some in the white robes of Scrum, and Scrum talks about Scrum of Scrum and Scrum of Scrum.